Oh, I have to.
Wait.
I look at it.
Thanks to whoever was wearing, but I didn't send him my.
So they change them out. I kind of look at it like it doesn't right. Like a 3,000. So.
Yeah, very legitimate.
It
was very, was it, there was not a lot of, it was
more like change from the first one.
No, I'm just saying, they said, oh, there's a picture of my.
Oh.
This one. So I sent her link again.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we go. So.
I really.
We didn't know we didn't have.
No, it was that. I just.
So about the cost. They asked how much they want to sell it.
It's their account now.
Just
in my head.
For you guys?
My boss was great. I leave for Alaska. No, I was just gonna say what it is, which takes up most of my time. Have you been in the new building?
They'll get, I think they have, they supply it. You can find them, they have.
You save that money for years. It gives you a new life. We lost all the and stuff down and the turtles and all the animals down there. Every now and then we hear a bunch of kids screaming because they come in and bring them to school. Tell them I tell them the animals down. Yeah, the elevator is in a, so the basement is not done, that's what it's thinking. So right now, apartment 154, roof isn't, I think. It's nice to have right now.
Well, I used to park in the Bay Street lot and watch these. So it's kind of nice. Still be-
Okay, oh, it's on. We'd like to go ahead and call this joint meeting of the Santa Clara City Council and the Ivan City Council to order, a special work meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone who is here tonight. We appreciate you being here. I'd like to particularly welcome our special guests from Ivans, the Ivan City Council and their city manager. I'm just going to pass this around so everybody gets their, well, their mayor's here too. He's so fussy. I'm Mayor Rick Rosenberg. I'm the mayor of Santa Clara, and I'm just going to pass the mic around. Everybody, please introduce yourself.
Chris Hart, Ivan City Mayor. The Overlooked.
Jenny Johnson, City Council.
Adele Murphy, City Council.
Dale Coolum, Ivan City Manager.
Matt Ince, Santa Clara City Attorney.
Brock Jacobson, Santa Clara City Manager.
Jarrett Waite, Santa Clara City Council.
Denny Drake, Santa Clara City Council.
Krista Hinton, Santa Clara City Council.
Lena Mathis, Santa Clara City Council.
Ben Shakespeare, Santa Clara City Council.
Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you being here. It's good to see you again. It's been a while.
And Mike Scott to Ivan City Council.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mike. Anybody else on Zoom?
We have city recorder from Ivans.
And
Carrie.
the Ivan City Recorder's online. Carrie? Okay, there we go. Anybody else? I don't want any more voices from above during these special meetings. Okay, thank you. Appreciate you being here, Mike. Carrie, welcome. On the working agenda tonight, we have a discussion regarding local agreements. This is our agreements for police and fire. And I think Chief Flowers, you have a presentation you'd like to give to the group. We'll turn it over to Chief Flowers. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. There's a mic down on that end. I'll have one on this end.
Yes, and these mics in the middle, these are there too. They should, those are be picking up as well. Yes. They do not have to pass that. Over here.
I've had to make some adjustments to my presentation tonight. I had Captain Ridge coming and Lieutenant Studley. We had a bunch of stats, but we've been on a case all day since 10 o'clock this morning, and it's demanded all of our folks there. I just changed and hurried here, and the fire folks have been helping us. And I just don't want to go any more than that. Just trust me that you will be hearing about it, and involves multi-agency response. And so it probably worked out a little bit for the better, because what we were going to show you is all of our statistics for the last 5 years with the cities combined. But we got to thinking it might be better to come back to the individual city councils and present it to that, because they're a little different in each city. And so I'll do that within the next few weeks. Okay. All right. So everybody heard what I said. So, well, what I'm going to do is I will come back to the stats with individual cities. I'll actually get on the agendas. I want to make it more than a report to go through everything and talk about why we're doing what we're doing, and then ask for feedback, make sure we're giving you what you want. So Captain Rogers has that tonight, and he's at a scene and can't be here. So, but the way that I envisioned this to go was I was going to tell you some of our accomplishments for the year, and then we were going to, let's do it. And then when I showed you the stats, I was going to show you what we're doing to deal with those and what our strategies are, looking for feedback. But like I said, it's just not available to me right now. But what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things we did last year, maybe some things you knew and didn't know, and talk to you a little bit about some of our short and long-term range, show you a little bit of our strategy, take about 5 minutes, and then talk to you about what we see in the next couple of years that I think as councils you would probably be very concerned with. About 3 months ago, we all sat down and decided we wanted to relook at our mission statement and what we do on a daily basis and how we do it. I think you have to go through that as a department every few years to make sure that you're not just getting in a patrol car, starting it up, and just wandering about. I think that's inefficient, and so we like a more targeted approach, and we've done that pretty well. One of the things we evaluated was, this quality of service. How do you measure that actually? I measure it a couple of ways: feedback from all of you, feedback from our citizens, complaints that maybe come in. I look at our response times and look at our successful prosecutions. I actually talked to the county attorney's office about the quality of our reports. And I'm really happy to report we're right on target with everything. We've had some real high profile cases where we've got convictions where people have been convicted of crimes and sent away for, 15 to life. Just in the last 4 months, we've had, our detectives have done a really good job there. So I also look at a couple of things. I look at our officers. I look at what some of their accomplishing personally. We've had 3 officers this year grab their master's degrees. We've got some attending schools. We've got some that are actually looking to get into a little, like for instance, instructors, those kinds of things, kind of sharpening their skills. Schools are very expensive. To send somebody to a crime scene academy is like $3,000. So we've been looking at that. Also, one of our accomplishments this year was also we hired 3 new officers and got them through field training. That's a lot of work. It takes about 6 months to get them all through that. We've met all the demands on the de-escalation training that's been required by the state. We've exceeded the officers there, and all of our officers are certified with crisis intervention, which is, dealing with people that are in situations where high emotion and all that. Frankly, law enforcement did, in my opinion, need to improve on that and not treat everybody the same, look at people a little differently. And I also, meeting the needs of our victims through our victims advocacy. One of the numbers I was going to give you was, you'd be shocked at the amount of hours and time we spend with our victims. But what I want to do is give that to each city individually, so you'll know what that means to your citizens. If you remember, we went through the accreditation a couple of years ago. That's a lot of work even. You don't attain it and then you're done. You have to we just had Jaron Studley go up to Salt Lake for a day where they talk about all the changes with the law, changes in the training demands. So part of our strategy is to keep clicking those boxes. If you keep doing that, it keeps you at a higher level. And it's a very, very good goal to keep. We updated all of our radios and our communications. I know you're probably tired of hearing about that process. I know Chief Parker was going through the same thing. And then recently we just did a camera modernization with our cameras. It's just gear that wore out. If you remember, we were one of the first agencies that went, and your entire agency, to the video cameras a few years back, but that gear is all worn. And so we had to redo that. We feel very, very, very good about our accomplishments last year. I hate to say this because the minute I say it, I know it'll happen, but we didn't have one complaint. We had some issues about our processes, but none about the behavior of our officers, which I think is very, very phenomenal. We hire very good people. I know a lot of chiefs would like to say the same thing, but we're a small place and a great community. And I think our citizens are wonderful too. One of our strategies for this next year or so is I worry about our employees, as you do. We all wrestle with employee pay and employee benefits. Well, our councils were very generous with us last year around December time. As you know, we came to you and asked you for a very significant pay raise just to stay competitive in the county. That was granted. And I think we don't need to be the highest paid, but we certainly shouldn't be down scratching the bottom either. Because if you do that, your officers will go. They will. It's just the way you look at every department. Everybody's scrambling to keep their good people because they will jump for $3 or $4 an hour. They just will. And our benefit package is great. So I think that I will do some evaluation and work with the HR and make sure we're staying competitive there and at least bring it up as an issue. I also gave to you kind of a new format on our reports to council. Our reports were getting a little lean. We acknowledge that. So we did a new kind of report. I'd like you to look at those. If I don't hear back, you're satisfied. If you want more, you want a little different, then let me know. And we'll be happy to make any changes to the agenda of those. I'd like to get those a little early to the city managers, and then they will send them off to you. But that's more detail of some of the stuff we just did last month. That's not, and you start looking at that, you're going, wow, there's a lot of accomplishment there. So our process of, it sounds cheesy, but we actually did it. I've got a book, it's called Charting the Course. And what I've done is I've set down my personal goals and what I want to accomplish in the next year for the department. And then what I've asked the captain and lieutenant to do is to take those goals and make your goals match with those in a way that we're all rowing in the same direction. And then we're taking it to the sergeants and to the officers. That process is, we're still going through that. It's working pretty well. For instance, when we say we need to beef up our traffic enforcement, what does that actually mean? You get complaints and people say, well, what are you doing in my neighborhood? Well, we want to have strategies for that. Strategies of response, so you can respond back to your folks, tell them what we've done, actually track the citations written, the cars stopped. Like right now, that construction area is just crazy. At night, I don't know how people figure that thing out sometimes. And where those roundabouts are going in and our citizens are coming in back way and coming all the way into both of our cities, we've decided that we're going to work that really hard for a while, especially late at night. It's weird, but we have some complaints about that. So I tell people, let me tell you what we're doing and then I'll report back. I know that there's been times where we've had, well, put our speed trailer there and then we'll report back to you what those numbers are. Country Lane is one. We get a lot of complaints on Country Lane. We're getting some more complaints on Graveyard Hill coming into town. On Santa Clara Parkway and up on Pioneer, places like that. We try to get out there. But if you get out there in a marked patrol car, everybody's suddenly like they're in Sunday school, right? So the idea is you got to find a way to get out there and enforce that in an unmarked car. But unmarked cars are little dicey things in the environment we live in right now. People want you marked and they want you in uniform. So, we'll continue to wrestle with that. One of the things that my personal things that I thought we would do is maintain professional reputation through communication, cooperation, and transparency. That's a lot of gobbledygook. It's not like something you can get out of any manual, but when you break that down, that's a lot. First off, response. When people call the police department, they want an immediate response. If they call and you say, we're going to get back to you, they want you back to them like pronto. They don't want you to call them back in a couple of days. And then they want the feedback. You're the same way. You call me, you want, so we're going to work on that a little bit. I think we've done a pretty good job with that. We're actually setting up some processes for our transparency. One of the things we're talking about is ethics, ethical training in our department, doing the right things for the right way, watching what you say, watching what you do. And part of that is we're going to be reviewing our own video, going back and looking at that and just watching how we interact with each other. So again, sticking with our accreditation and then just maintaining an environment in our two cities where people trust the police department. Now, that sounds good, but what does that mean? We're kind of trying to figure that one out. I think it's your response, your feedback. I think it's your newsletters that we're going to do better on that. And so that's one of the things that I've looked at. Then when we're talking about nighttime patrol, I've asked all the sergeants to come up with their own goals and the officers to match what we're trying to get out there. So it's all going to tie in together. And then we should have that done in the next 3 weeks. And that's when I'd like to come back to the councils and say, here you go. But before that, we work for you. And if there's anything that you think you see that you want to see differently, again, we are the implementers of your policy. And so we would love to hear any feedback, good or negative, anything that you would like for us to do. And it's the same thing with the citizens. I'm pretty good. I get out there and I ask a lot of questions from our citizens. They think it's kind of weird that, first of all, you pull up next to them when they're walking down the street and you think, okay, what did I do? And hey, you can't do that. But once you say, look, this is what I need, what do you think? What do you need in your neighborhood? And it's kind of interesting once they open up to you, some really good news there. The things that in my mind, again, that I want you to be thinking about the next year or two is we need to do something about our animal shelters. We're going to look at that. We are called, we have a lot of calls involving our animals. So in our animal shelters, at the city of Santa Clara, there just needs to be some work done there. We need to add some concrete, add some fences and some shade and modernize a few things. May even look at expanding that a bit. The same thing in Ivans is that we need to look at that. At the same time, we need to modernize a little bit. Spread it, break up some concrete and bring in some more concrete, modernize our fences and our gating systems and some of those things. And we're probably going to be looking at least another full-time employee, to be honest with you. When we come back to you with the numbers, you'll see the numbers we have involving. I've broken it down into service calls and category 1 kind of crimes. And our service calls are the things like inspections, animal calls. You'd be surprised how much of that of our work is we do. And our officers are spending, I think personally, too much time responding to unnecessary things that animal personnel should be responding to. We'll be looking at a vehicle for our canine. We just need to get a new car for them, and they are expensive. You've got special air conditioning systems, the cars have to run, you've got gates that open and close. So we'll be getting some prices for that. Just want you to be thinking there. Also, when we come to you and give you the numbers, we're going to be looking at, we need to add a detective. One of the great things, as you know, we have Detective Pondoyo. He moved to the Washington County, not really called the Drug Task Force anymore, but it's more of a major crimes. And he's actually moved into an area that's going to be great for us. It's fraud, ID theft, those kinds of things. I think one of the topics that's going to be coming our way in the next couple of years, people don't like the idea when they've been scammed for $5,000 to $8,000. I don't know, they're in Ghana, they're here or they're there. But I think that one of the big gripes I have with the federal government, it doesn't seem to me, and I don't put this on the federal folks totally, but it doesn't seem to be any way of tracking anything. I mean, the same phone numbers, the same kind of accents you're dealing with. It seems to me there should be more being done. If it's not $100,000, it's like, oh, well, but you know, it's hard for me to look at a person when they've been scammed out of $5,000 saying, oh, well, buyer beware. I mean, that's unfortunately the story right now, but going back with Mike, he's going to develop some expertise in the next couple of years. And when he comes back to the department, it's going to be wonderful to have him with that area, with that nice expertise. Coming with that, I don't know if we look at adding personnel when it comes to the animal shelter and looking at a detective, I think that that'd be sufficient for us. We've been funded pretty well when it comes to our equipment. I've worked really closely with Dell and Brock on that. And they've been very good about allowing us to do a few things. Dell actually came to me at the end of last year and says, hey, we've got a little bit extra here that you guys have saved, and we were able to buy a third vehicle where we're only budgeted for 2 vehicles, which is just great. It was great for us, and so I appreciated that. Overall, it's a good news report, but I've also thought, again, we'll come to you individually, and in the meantime, if you have something, one of the things that I want to make sure you're comfortable with both cities is the time we spend in both cities. We kind of talk about that, and I know when we first combined up, there was some discussion about where officers spend their time. I know when we were located here in Santa Clara, there was some discussion, you guys getting the guidance, now we're up there, discussion. I want you to be very, very, very comfortable with that. We don't see borders. We see citizens. And but we will give you an idea of that's why I think it would be more important for us to come back and report to you individual cities with the numbers that apply to your particular area and the crime diagrams. I think you'll like it. I think you'll be encouraged by what you see. And I wish I had it for you tonight, but our guys are fast at it right now. And they're doing some fantastic work. It's a multi-agency thing that's reaching outside of our county. And so that's all I have. Do you have anything for me? I would love any feedback tonight or another time.
Questions? Chief?
So Chief, are you experiencing the same kind of recruiting that we were seeing a year ago or 6 months ago when we met, recruiting of our officers by other agencies?
Yeah. 2 of our officers have been approached within the last month. And we're competitive, better place to work. I think we have, I'm not downplaying anybody else's leadership, but I think our employees are satisfied. We have great equipment. There's nothing they can get anyplace else that they can't get here. The work is, they're just as busy as any place else. Will we lose people? Probably. I know one officer, he's not unhappy here. Don't get me wrong. He's not circumstances, but you know, he lives in a different area and I won't let him take his car there. He just wears out the car. I don't choose where he'll live, but you're not going to take our car from here to Cedar City or even to Enterprise. It just wears the cars out. I don't think taxpayers would appreciate that. And I've learned a lesson personally on that a little bit. So for me, it's nothing to do with pay, benefits, treatment. It's just sometimes employees move on for whatever reason. So we're not seeing it now, will we? Yeah, probably, but it's not for any reasons that anything that we can do about it. It's, you know, what it is. Yeah, I feel very good where we're at.
And then one other follow-up, because we're together, you were gracious enough to house law enforcement for a long period of time. And now we've converted, as you know, our old city hall into our law enforcement building. And one of the concerns that I've had are there concerns that you have over that taking place? Is there anything that you'd point to that changed in any material way that we ought to know about, fix as a result of that?
I will say one thing, Brock knows that we have an office in this building and we use it a lot, probably daily. And if we have citizens that come to this building and want a police officer, we do not expect them to go to Ivins. We will come to them, and it's a really nice office and they use it a lot. It's fully equipped and ready to go. So we do have a presence here. So.
And that's just what I was going to say, is they do have a presence upstairs that citizens can come and make an appointment to be there. Do I miss having 3 or 4 cars in the parking lot every day? Sure. It was kind of a nice feeling when you came in and that obvious presence was here. And I wonder now, when I push the red button up there, how long is it going to take for the ninjas to come out of the ceiling? But we've talked about it and I feel pretty good about you know, their presence and knowing that they'll be here. If somebody wants to talk to them, they'll come here and do that.
I've always felt that that was a critical issue for a successful combination, is that everybody, all citizens in both cities, understand that they get the same service, regardless of where we're located physically, because the officers, that's just where the officers are. They're in their cars. That's where they'll go to write a report. Matter of fact, if the officer's spending too much time in the offices, we wonder why. And that goes to some of the things we're doing with our charting our courses. We're going to actually look at how we spend our time. How much time are we spending on reports? Since an officer makes an arrest, okay, like what happened the other night, an officer's out there just on the matter of fact, where the 2 cities come to bed, he makes a stop on a vehicle, doesn't have any lights on, and winds up making a DUI arrest and a drug arrest and a number of arrests out of that. By the time they're done with that, that's 3 hours of their shift gone, and they still have to write 2-hour report. So arrest takes 5 hours because you got half hour out there, you got half an hour, 45 minutes booking, depending on how busy they are, your 30-minute drive back, let alone the process of making the stop and gathering your evidence. But we want to look at the time. And then another thing too is we want to look where people spend their time, where the officers are doing it. And those are just difficult questions. It's just a quality check. I don't think for a second anybody is not doing things right. But it's good for me to be able to come back to you and say, we spent this much time in the parks walking. We spent this much time out at Fire Lake Park. We spent this much time over here in Goobler trying to keep people from fighting over there at the pickleball courts or at the softball tournaments, you know? So those are things that we're doing them, but we don't track it sometimes as effectively as we should. That's what we're looking at, so we can report it back. Tell you what we're actually doing out there.
Chief, just maybe an update on South Hill since that was changed with where you can shoot out there. Has things changed from your guys' side, or you seen a difference?
Yeah, we're not seeing it. We'll get a few folks once in a while, but some people still have that historical view of things that they can go out there and they didn't see the sign. We haven't had any problems with any of that at all, but we get up there a lot. There's still nefarious behavior that goes on up there. It's just not necessarily shooting. So we're getting up there and taking care of that. That actually raises an issue with me. And I talked to city attorney, there he is, Matt. I was talking to him about a month ago, and I've had the same conversation with Dell a little bit about our ordinances. We need to look at our ordinances again, from our weed ordinances to parked vehicles. We want to make sure that, you know, it's one of those things, it's a quality of life in a neighborhood where when you talk to people, they're not really concerned what's going on over there. They want to know what's going on in their neighborhood. What about this neighbor that's got 20 cars parked out there or violating our city ordinances? And then another thing too, we still have a problem with people thinking it's okay to get on your dirt bike and ride down the street at 14 years old. You can't put a motorcycle on the street unless you're a licensed driver. And the only allowances they have is if it's an off highway, they can go, it's kind of a judgment thing, point A to point B. They can't get on their bikes and ride up to Harmon's and get a drink of some type and then head back. That's not what the law is intended. And there's been some changes with actually golf carts. It's been kind of loosened up. And then we have a problem with these electric bikes. We're going to need some guidance from the two councils on what you want us to do there. You've got the bikes you can pedal and the bikes with no pedal. And some of those things are just motorcycles that are electric engines is all they are. And so, and I was telling our officers before we go all medieval on that, we probably should get some guidance from the councils on what they're thinking there. So, but we have some work to do. Again, that will be one of those things we come back to you individually and say, what do you want here? And these are it's boring stuff. I get it. Nobody wants to sit in an office and talk for 2 hours about, cars in the streets. If you're satisfied the way that it works, great. And then we'll tell you a little bit about what our process is on that. We tag a car. We don't necessarily go call a wrecker in the next couple of days. We'll try to contact the people, work with them as much as we can, and we'll let the vehicles sit there a little bit. But we want to make sure that our policy is your policy, what you want us to be doing there. And so we'll be looking for some guidance on that. There is some work that needs to be done there.
By the way, Mayor, we'll keep a couple of those surplus vehicles and when we replace something, we'll put them in the parking lot back there if that'll help. So both of our cities have experienced, and frankly, Santa Clara even more so than Ivins, pretty significant increase in higher density types of housing, apartments, townhomes, and also on the nightly rental front. Has that translated into any meaningful change in like per capita incidence of crime of any kind?
My answer to that is no. The problem that has come with those is parking. Cars on the streets. You get a family of 4 and they have 4 vehicles, and generally they have a no-car, 2-car garage, one of those kind of things, and they'll have their construction vehicles out there. They're just working people trying to make a living, and I understand that. But our complaints about that is really the traffic issue. However, we get asked that question a lot about, you naturally assume that when you get a high volume place in, the crime will go up. Well, I'll show you the numbers for your city and you can decide for yourselves, but it's not anything that I'm concerned with. I'm not seeing it. I mean, sure, you'll get more kid things like sneaking in a pool or that sort of thing, but we're not seeing stuff created by that. When we had kind of a little bit of a crime spree in one of our vacation areas, it wasn't people from our community that committed that. That was one person from another town that came in and just walked through the neighborhood and cleaned a lot of people out. It wasn't anything that, was on us. I think that I'm always still surprised at the amount of unlocked vehicles with firearms, computers, wallets. People just pull up, get out of the car and walk in and come back an hour later and their stuff's gone. I think that's an educational thing that we'll probably need to. It's like talking about driving under the influence. You talk, people still do it, right? One of the problems that we notice, we're seeing a real increase in our traffic accidents. So the question is, where and why? Is it speeding? Is it a bad intersection? What is it? So we want to come back again and say, this is what we see and this is what our plan is to do about it. Really, I don't think you can enforce your way out of a traffic thing generally, but you can temporarily have an effect. But I think our increase in accidents is just all over the map. Vehicles running off the road, inattentive, some speed, a few DUIs, that sort of thing. But and it could be just because of our increase in traffic. So.
Chief, how's code enforcement going?
Code enforcement is going really well, actually. Our code enforcer, Kevin Lamika,
Is he doing it for both cities?
he's doing it for both cities, and we have that information for you. That was going to be something else. We were going to show you the work being put in both cities and because we're reaching a point where we got some problem areas we need some direction on. What is it that you want? What do our city attorneys think we can do? What are the councils, what you want to do? It's really funny. Each city has a little different problem. We want to but there's still some code enforcement. But we do have some people that will not clean up their property. Some of them don't even live in our area. And so it's weeds. You cut them down, they come back. Cut them down, they come back. And so we're going to come and show you some of that. But actually, it's doing pretty well. And that's something else we would include on our report. This is some of the code violations we see. It's been something we've stayed on top of. It's a big issue. It's one of those quality life things for neighborhoods, to be honest with you.
You probably wish it. So you mentioned the animal shelter, and what I'm curious about is, as the cities grow, obviously the numbers of pets are also increasing as well. So is this a numbers thing? You're talking about the need to expand or modernize or whatever is part of this regulatory things that we need to be doing now that we didn't need to do back in the day, or what?
I think our no-kill philosophy is a wonderful philosophy. I think we've been very successful with it. We've hit our numbers every year. I think that it's just growing. And, sometimes it's completely full in both shelters. But the problem is that they're deteriorating. It's not so much we need to expand the size of them, we just need to do some updating. For instance, we need to have a walk area in Santa Clara. We need to have a shade area. It's just a box out there. And it's worked okay, but we need to modernize that. And then we also, the city of Ivins, we've got some concrete that's needs some look at. We want to move the fences a bit, and we also want to increase the shade up there. Both areas need a little bigger storage area, and that could be done with structures that are not very expensive, but we would get more room if we were able to move all of our cages and stuff in place. I know it's not exciting to talk about, but it is a need that we have that I would say that it's one of our higher needs right now. We really do need to make those better. Our numbers are going up, there's no question. And I tell you, we do a lot of work for the county, but they pay us. They've they pay some significant, they've been really great partners, by the way. And the officers are at a loss because they just don't have an animal shelter. And so we want to support them on that. We do. But they've been very good. We'll call them and say, this is what it's costing for these animals. And I think they sent us a check here for $23,000 or something like that recently. So they've been good partners. And so I'm not saying that's not anything, but we are kind of the West Side Animal Shelter, and we work really closely with St. George, and our animal groups are very good to work with. That's why no change in the philosophy. I think it's great. We're able to do it. And I like it, frankly, but we do need to look at the shelters.
So are the frequency of adoptions going up with the numbers of animals? Or does it take longer now than it used to get an animal adopted out? In other words, are we congesting our facilities because of that, or is it just sheer numbers?
I think it's a little bit of numbers. I think our adoption rates are pretty good. I'm really surprised. We have some unadoptable animals, but we work with our animal groups to deal with those animals. There are some that you just can't release in public. They'll kill other animals or they'll kill people if they're given the chance. We've had some dogs in there that our animal people were scared. Is that a word? Scared? Afraid? They were not wanting to get near these animals, and we deal with those animals a different way, but it's open, transparent. We get advice. We invite dog trainers to come in, but those are not dogs that I think a city would want to adopt out in the public. I think there's some liability issues that far exceed. We have that responsibility to our citizens. I think that exceeds the responsibility of that animal, frankly. Okay.
Any other questions, councils, for Mike? Mike, you got anything?
Pardon me?
You sent animals to canal.
We used to. We haven't sent any there in a really long time. They're kind of good. Sometimes they're great people, but sometimes they're full. We don't work as closely with them as we used to.
I'm sorry, I think my mic was on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Bob, you talked about some of the needs you think that you have for the next couple of years. One thing I'm wondering about is that we've seen a lot of activity at the city council coming in with concept plans or preliminary plans for, I'd call it probably hundreds of new homes in the very northwest corner of Ivans and the very southwest corner of Ivans, sort of new territory for us from the standpoint of we haven't had anything there before. And likewise, probably a few thousand tourist accommodations, short-term rentals, and homes on our eastern border. So not only is our population growing over the next few years, but the territory is growing. Does that have an additional impact on staffing, facilities, equipment from your standpoint?
Well, yeah, I think it can. But I think you got to look at more than just population. For instance, if you look at the federal numbers, they say 1.3 to 1.5 officers per 1,000 people. We're only 0.75. We're way below the national average. So you look at the numbers, you look at your calls for service, you look at what your calls are, and that's something you've got to stay awake and pay attention to and probably evaluate on a yearly basis. I don't think it's just population. I think it's the type of growth, what the growth is, and you sort of play catch up there. We can get out preventative. I say, yeah, man, I'd like to have 1.5 officers. That means I would need 10 more officers. I don't think anybody wants to pay for that just yet. But so what you do is you watch and track your numbers carefully. It's exactly what we're talking about, how you spend your time, what your priority of your calls are. A lot of agencies now don't do things they used to do, like they don't investigate accidents and private property. They don't respond to sometimes thefts at your home. They just say, go to your insurance. There's a lot of things larger agencies no longer do because of that. We're not anywhere near that, but there are things that we need to look at that we could spend our time better at. For instance, animal shelter people can alleviate some of the work on our officers by doing that. So your short answer is it could, but you need to look at all the variables and you need to pay attention to what types of crimes, where they're at and what that's about and how you use your resources. It's sort of like a really thick stew. And you've got to just watch it very carefully. But of course, if our populations get to build out, I think it's common sense to determine that your EMS costs are going to go up, your fire is going to go up, and your law enforcement. The demand on those services will go up with it. I know that our fire department responds a lot into Snow Canyon, which is, not to speak for the fire chief, but generally those citizens are visitors. They're not paying taxes down here, but they still require the services. So sometimes we get taxed with that. That's just kind of a little offshoot of people coming for the weekend. So we're watching that. I know, just one more thing I'll say on that. We talk about it a lot in our department about our needs and personnel. And personnel costs are, once you get them, you've got them, unless you're going to do something like let people go. So you got to be very careful and judicious with that. Sometimes I think technology, better equipment can address, that was one of the reasons why we formed up Stu Cities, if you remember, was a better use of our people and demand on our smaller, we could never have done it standing alone and get the quality that we have right now. So I think you've got to continually watch that. We do, and we look at those, and that's just part of the numbers and the reporting I give to you. You look at your response times, you look at your services and what those calls are and your numbers. It's all that together. I think that answered it, Councilman Scott. It's a complex thing. Okay.
Any other questions for Chief Clark?
Okay, I don't mean to be rude, but I'm going to go. I got to go out to that other thing. And like I said, I will in the next few weeks get on the agenda and come give it those numbers specifically to each city. Okay.
Thank you, Chief. Be safe out there. Okay, next up is the fire and EMS. Chief Parker.
Okay, good evening. You guys can hear me okay, correct? All good on the audio?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you and good evening to you all. So I'm going to kind of I don't have a presentation up on the screen, but just kind of give an overview. I'm hoping from these, talking with Brock, but just to get your guys' feedback on where you want to see the fire department go. There's conversations that always occur, amongst council members, public, social media, all of those things. But to get clear direction is going to be helpful for us. I think it'll be helpful for how we plan for our budget year coming up, and then also helps on our operations and such too. So let me just start with an overview of kind of where we're at. And you guys may already know this, but at the Rachel Station, so we have 4 people that work up at the Rachel Station. We have the type 1, that's that big regular structure fire engine. There's 2 people on that. So, and then we also have that medic ambulance at the Rachel Station. There's 2 people on that as well. Up at Center Street, we have 2 people up there as well. And so the way it works is all of the rigs that we have are ready for deployment. They're in the station, and then those crews basically cross staff all that equipment, right? So if we get a vegetation fire, the crews will jump on the brush truck, and then the ambulance crew jumps on the water tender. So that's kind of some of the functionality of how we operate. And so right now we have 15 full-time line staff. And then we cover the other shifts, 6 part-time members. So every day we have 6 people. Again, some are part-time and some are full-time. When somebody goes off sick or they have vacation, then we backfill that either with reserve staff who are part-time, they're not assigned to a shift, or we fill it with the regular line staff. So that's kind of our numbers and how we operate. Con and myself, we share every other week. We share the duty, which is like a battalion chief, which is not a position that we have, but typically that's kind of the overseer, the commander of the 2 areas that we serve, and obviously the county. So that person typically would be in a vehicle, and they would run command and control. They would handle HR issues. Him and I will share that each week. So one week I'll have it. That's after hours. Obviously, if we're here, it's easy to go, but that'll be after hours. So that's what we've been doing for the last 18 months. That's really where our staffing has been and our response. We've been able to handle all of our calls with that staff. So we don't have to call in, like strike out a station and call volunteers necessarily to respond. So that's our deployment. And often, if we get, let's say, two calls at a time, that could tax all three of our resources. And then we get a third call, that's drawdown, which means we have to call Gold Cross or St. George or somebody else to come cover that call. So there were some questions from public that were filtered through me in email. Hope that clarifies that. But that drawdown is limited. So the staff, my point is, the staff that we have now is pretty adequate. So we cover over in when Gold Cross goes to level 0, which means they have no more ambulances. We'll go over there more often than they come over here. So that's kind of an overview. I think it's important. You folks know that we cover over 500 square miles. So when we redid our EMS license, it was over 500 square miles when we mapped it on our GIS. So again, we could be 45 minutes to Arizona border on the old Highway 91 to go out there, come back, could be an hour and a half, right? So those are ongoing issues we know about with the county and so on and so forth. But that's an obligation under our EMS licensing. Gold Cross does the same, and then Hurricane Valley also has that agreement. So technically, if Gold Cross had no ambulances and we were out on calls, call came into Santa Clara, Hurricane Valley Fire would come pick that call up. So that's in place. That's an agreement that's been ongoing for years. So any questions on that? I hope to get your feedback. I have a notepad here. I'd like to, don't hear from you guys too often, but I'd like to get some direction. Maybe you can send an email or we could talk or however that could be forwarded. But if you'd like to comment, I'd love to hear what you have on feedback as we move forward here. So some of our goals, again, obviously the cost of what we've done, the staffing we have is increased dramatically percentage wise, and also in dollar values. But I think some of my goals was to try to generate revenues this year. And so we've done that through grants. So I've gotten a grant from like the DPS for $5,000. We have 2 gals in paramedic school. They'll be finishing in December. So we'll have 2 additional paramedics, but we paid for their tuition and we were able to get grants back from the Utah Bureau of EMS to pay for that tuition. So we're hitting grants pretty hard. Lance has been great on that. And he's also working with the city to try to handle some grants with them, but we're moving forward with those. We're starting to see positive results with it. The second thing is our wildland deployment this year is going to be a big, it's a big change statewide. I was told 4 agencies, ourself, Layton Unified Fire, and I think it was North Davis, that's deploying basically the on-duty crews, those 6 people that we talked about. If the call comes in from wherever on the West Coast is typically, because typically don't go back to the East Coast for wildfire, but those crews will go. And so that's 3 people. And that's what we've been doing. They've been out since June 27th. It's about, depending on, because we have full-time staff, we use this calculator model that we went up to Salt Lake and everybody from the state that's into wildfire, we met and figured out what this rate's going to be, this calculator, and Unified drove that. So we're really using Unified's pay package and those things. So it really helps our rates that we charge for our personnel. So it's way above and beyond what the standard rate is. My point is we'll get about $66,000 to $75,000 for a 2-week deployment back. Obviously that's gross. We still have the overtime and the costs personnel. We had a rig broke down twice. We're working on getting that wild engine that y'all ordered. It's supposed to be here a year ago. Hopefully it'll be here soon, but we're using our old rig and it broke down a couple times. So those costs, it's $7,500 to fix whatever it might be. Those are incurred. So I'm thinking we'll be about, let's say on the 70,000, we would incur around $35,000 in expenses. So the rest would be a profit. And we'll work those figures out for the bean counters to make sure we have those all right. And you guys, and Ivans gets their share of it, and obviously it gets split fairly. So, but no, I think November will kind of square up with that. So it just know too, wildland season, it's like, hey, we have a crew and they come from May to October. Now, because it's on-duty staff, it could be in December. So they could be deployed, if highly unlikely, but they could be deployed in December to do like a emergency response mission, like flooding or sandbags, and we'll recoup the same costs. So just know that change, but we'll try to square up in, I think, around November on that, that revenue. So that's an interesting one, a very dramatic is what I call change, because it's the costs go up with employee expenses, but we obviously recoup that above and beyond. So I'm excited about it. I didn't think we'd get hit this heavily with assignments, but it's been action packed. So and then EMS billing, we're obviously continuing to do that.
Just on that, so before we were limited to 6 on the wildland, you could hire them for 6 months. Are those restraints still in place under this new thing, or has that kind of gone away?
We've gone away with it. I think when I first came in, it was kind of like a lot of the stuff was like, hey, we'll just do what we did. And we tried to go for that crew. And there were some issues with that because of other locales were paying these higher rates for those seasonal crews. But know that the gentleman we just hired, full-time firefighter, he was Dameron Valley's engine boss. So that engine boss guy is kind of the captain. They're in charge of the rig. You can't go out, depending on what the request is without that person. So we now have their engine boss, right? And the state had trouble getting their one pickup truck, their engine boss. So we have, I want to say we have 5 now. So our goal is to get every captain's an engine boss. So our first captain went out June 27th, and he would have gone out the 9th if he was able to go again. So that's about a month and a half break between. So having more of those engine bosses is going to help. So next year will be, we'll have additional. But yeah, our goal is to get 7 total engine bosses. So all captains, which is 6, and then our firefighter we hired just so happened to have had captain experience in other organizations, and then that wildland experience. So it'll be interesting to watch again, talking with our partners like Layton, Kevin Ward up there. It's a good revenue source. So I'm hoping it continues, but that's pretty much all I have on the wildland stuff. So any questions for me?
Parenthetically, it's a great thing to have because of what we're surrounded by. I like the fact that we have it here, at least even part of the time.
Yeah, we have 2 of those rigs, and when we get the new one, we'll have 3. So we always make sure that we cover Santa Clara Ivans first, and obviously the county areas, we're always backfilling and making sure that staffing's there and the rigs are there. So we limit to how many people we go out, that will go out. So we never reduce our staffing here. So hope that helps you.
Maybe I can add too, some of the changes that happened that the chief was talking about with the state unified push. Previously, we hired 4 to 5 seasonal employees that did the roughly May through September to October. Because at the time, the rates that we got from the state would pay for those guys. And so we hired them because we didn't have the full-time staff to send out on these calls. The things that changed with the state is now the state not only pays for those that go out, but now the people have to backfill our full-time to come in, we get compensated for them to come and fill in those shifts. Where it wasn't, so trying to find people to come and work for 5, 6 months out of the year was getting more and more difficult to find those. And so this change, the unified push, allowed us to say, hey, we can get back into it because we have the full-time staff who is trained in wildland fire, plus the leader to compensate us to backfill when we bring back in our other full-time employees, which has allowed us. So the rates, as he said, gone up, plus we're getting paid, compensated for us to bring in other full-time employees to cover the shifts that are being vacated while they're on calls. And as he said, our staff is pretty much 3 are out, and we're sending 3 out and 3 are coming back. That's pretty much been going on since mid-July. Or June. They're just rotating in and out. It's been very busy.
Yeah, Nevada, the kind of the West Coast, just because of the fire activity we get out here, Colorado included with that, has moved to that. So we're kind of catching in on that, the state. So it's something that's being done, and that adjusts to, like Brock said, our rates on our rig. They factor in all of that miles, the wear and tear, and they come up, and we go annually up there to adjust that rate. So like Debbie, our finance director, she can say, oh no, the cost for PERS went up, so that rate's going to go up. So we're trying to, the state we'll say the state needs our help. It's like that in every state, though. They just don't have to suppress these large vegetation fires. They need local municipalities to help. And that's kind of why it works and why they're willing to pay. So, yep. Any questions, Mark?
So are all of our full-time personnel cross-trained?
Correct. Every single full-time and then the part-time on shift. And we have some reserve staffs that are solely EMS. There's 2 personnel that are just EMS, but everybody else is cross-trained. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So that's really been helpful. And there are some costs with that too. Like we needed radios. The guys noticed when they went out there that they weren't compatible with the systems out there. So we did make an expense to buy radios. That the Wildland radios are different than the in-town structure firefighting radios. So that was an expense that was positive and kind of helping. Hey, it wasn't in our budget, but we were able to get this revenue and pay for something that actually was needed. So I'm excited about whatever, future deployments we have and what the Wildland program will do. So EMS wise, again, continuing to do billing. So I'm still talking about revenues. Kind of my initial thing here was we appreciate where we're at. I know every member does. And I think the staff's excited to be where they are with the shifts they're able to work, the income that they're able to make from service and equipment that's being replaced, the new budget that we have. Guys and gals are pretty happy about it. So my point in this was like, hey, how can we help, right, to offset these costs? And I think that's, again, that Wildland's one of them. The grants, we're going to continue to hit those. The EMS billing, that's kind of holds true. It just kind of stays on an autopilot. As calls go up, we get more opportunity to bill, but there's no increase on that. I've talked a little bit about it, and it would be probably a city manager discussion, but impact fees, how do these large resorts, the large resort coming in, how do they, I guess, pay for the impact that they're going to have on us in 2 years? So that's something I want to look at for sure is and specifically for the ladder truck, right? This $2 billion resort, it's going to be a huge impact. They have all the high access points they're generating. We have that now with Harmon's and our office building here, Econ Apartments, Rocky Vista. We have it, but they're going to be generating the need for it. So, and they're not, even though it's a new fire suppression systems in a new building, we'd get them where I worked previously in like a Best Western hotel. They get a fire in an apartment. Sure, the sprinkler puts it out, but you still have the process of evacuation. You really run into, it's not a high rise, but you run into that operation, which is a whole new realm of training and equipment. And we're prepping for that to handle that occupancy load, right? They have the underground parking's got over, I think, 1,000 cars. So it'll be interesting to see what that facility does. And I think we might look at, how they impact us and the things that we might need. How do we utilize them to help us with that? So, and then there's other things. I think they're smaller scale, but I know Con's been doing a great job on plan reviews and just trying to do things in-house, especially when it comes to working with Mike and Ivans. He's been working tirelessly to kind of reduce costs on those so we don't have to go out for fees. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention, for example, like maybe we're not going to get more staffing or more resources, but I think our partnerships have been vital with Dameron Valley Fire Rescue, Chief John Hennessy up there, Mac on the board with them, and basically wanting to play with us. So every fire, like we had the fire at the VA home today, they come on the first alarm assignment, Dameron Valley Fire Rescue, with 2 people and their battalion chief. So that bolsters our staffing just through a partnership. And that's why we give them, I think there's been questions asked about like, hey, why do they have this rig for $1 for our lease? Well, because they train our personnel. They respond into our cities. They cover our calls when we're at the VA home. They move up to our station. So if another call comes in, they'll take that call. So those are kind of the give and takes of the partnerships. That's why we might do things. We might not charge them an arm and a leg to use an engine that's 20 years old for their fire academy? Well, it's because they train us. So a lot of our people that come through and they obviously work in the partnership. So that's kind of the intro. So that's kind of some of the goals and just, again, we're trying to do our part. I'm trying to think of, there's creative ways, talking with folks in the audience about creative ways to get funding, right? There's solutions to it. And I'm hoping we're doing our part to help. So anything you folks, have questions on that, just that you want to see different, or any ideas for revenue source? Wildland program?
No new ideas, but what future needs are you identified, Chief, that you think are coming down the line that we need to be thinking about?
You said the needs, right?
I said needs, yeah.
Regarding staffing or just everything?
Needs, equipment.
Okay. Yeah. So
new fire stations.
I want to kind of focus on 3 areas. So one's going to be the staffing. So that's kind of my intro. So we still have staffing. I want to go over our vehicles, just talk about that, apparatus, and then kind of the station ideas on what I think the needs are. So we'll go into that. We've talked about response times and calls. In 2020, we're at 1,342 calls. This year, we're projected to be around 1,600. On the rolling 12-month, we're about 1,604. So that's approximately 5 to 8% increase every year. Response times polled by Lance Haney was in 2020 was about 14.77 minutes average. We're down to about 5 to 6 minutes, depending on which station you're looking at. And so staffing, again, that 6. I've talked from kind of when I arrived here, we're looking to get that 3-2 staffing. So 3 people on an engine and 2 people on an ambulance. But that might be 10, 15 years from now, but we have our sights on that long-term goal. So some of the discussions were the SAFER grant. Obviously, there's other tax measures and things, the way we can fund, but is that something that we want to look at? Not maybe this year, but maybe 2 years from now. Do we want to look at SAFER grant options for staffing, right? To increase that. And again, every fire that we go on, we have those 6 people. NFPA is recommending 16 people on a residential house fire, right? So that's the recommendation. Does every city do that? Well, no. But it improves our safety. We want to increase that staffing. If we added 3, we would just put those 3 at Rachel Station. We'd have 3 people on the engine today and 2 people on the ambulance. Everything else would go to Ivans. So we would just work to staff that rig properly. Again, those 2 people up at Ivans have to cross staff the equipment. So when they get on the ambulance, obviously a fire comes in, they got to drive back to the station, get on the engine and go. But engine 31 is always in service, obviously, at Rachel, but those are kind of some of the logistics that occur, so that's our goal, is again, that to get, I don't know when it'll be, and it'll be like Chief Flowers was talking, how we generate that demand will be, for us, it'll be call volume, and that drawdown is it's gonna show itself with that resort. I believe it. And then Snow Canyon Point, like the senior center, assisted living, we know those typically do 100 to 150 calls a year just for those facilities. So that's coming, and we expect our call volume just to continue. And again, I think when I talk, it's like, hey, we're not just serving the 9,000 people in Santa Clara or the 10, 11, 12 in Ivans. It's bigger than that, because of the incoming visitors and daily population, I think is more than just that. So that's what I'm hoping. We're all thinking just big picture on these facilities and these resorts, what it takes to respond to calls, especially Black Desert's the impact. So, but that's a little bit on the staffing. I think I told you guys about the 2 paramedics we have going through. We have 1 person that became an arson investigator. She's now on call. So she's certified to go out to our calls, fire calls, and provide our own investigations. She's working closely with the state arson investigator as well. So that program's expanding. Again, I talked about Con and his kind of one-man show with his giant Luxor size resort. But I walked through that the other day. I'd love to get you guys, if you haven't been out there on foot, I've heard about it. I've seen the plans. I've been out there with concrete, but I actually walked it today. I think it's monumental on what it requires, all the sprinkler PVC fittings for each floor. He's in charge of making sure that's properly done. So my point is increasing the prevention staffing, even if it's a part-time, like fire inspector, somebody that can do fire prevention, so he can focus on the plan review, and they can go out and do like routine inspections. So again, our operations personnel, and then the fire prevention bureau, the office staff would be great too. So I can have somebody help me with credit card receipts and things, but that's really, we want boots on the ground, firefighters. That's going to help our ISO. Again, we don't get credit for me and Colin being at the Ivan station, 0 credit, because we're administrative. It's boots on the ground firefighters is what gives us our ISO credit. So that's really where I want to focus our efforts if we did the SAFER grant or some type of other funding came through to increase staffing. That's it on that. Do you have any questions on the staffing? So then I'll move into vehicles and station concerns.
My questions mainly just for Ivans. I know that was a big concern a couple of years ago. Is it with staff there at the Center Street? Is that improve from residents' feelings? It's been a positive thing?
The ISO rating that drastically improved after that move was made. As you remember, one of the big concerns was the fact that insurance rates or even availability of insurance would be questioned in some of the more remote parts of the unit. So it's been, Council, I won't speak for it, but it strikes me that it's been huge improvement. We're very grateful. I don't know how Brock and the chief pulled that off. That was really a quick solution. It's made a big difference, I think. You have something to bring up when we talk about stations.
Okay.
Let's make a comment on staff, just to kind of keep in mind a culture of needs versus would be nice. Let's keep it to needs. Whether that's, talk about office staff help to do receipts or fire prevention kinds of things. Take a good close look at that. It's really needed versus what would be nice to have. Err to the side of needs would be responsible for our community.
Maybe this may be an early question, but maybe a question for you, Dale. Do we have projections? Obviously, Black Desert is primarily in Ivans right now, but are there projections out for room tax revenues that'll come to the city based on what's happening out there? I mean, obviously, there can be room tax and restaurants, all of that, but has that been done or got an idea?
Not in detail, I don't think. It's also, as we talked about, equipment and staff that might be required in response to respond to the resort. I think both cities need to update their impact fees for public safety. It's been a couple of years. I know we at least had a ladder truck in that last one, but but with inflation and everything, that's not sufficient. And so we need to update our studies. I think that's one of the first things that we need to do, so that we know what equipment is going to be required. Probably more than just a ladder truck. Now is kind of your development along Pioneer, and as further development of these areas of short-term rentals in Santa Clara, and then the main resort right now in Ivans. That's going to generate some needs, and we need to make sure that's covered in our impact fee studies, because we can't just arbitrarily charge impact fees to what we would like to. it has to be based upon a study. So that's our starting point. I think we really need to do that as we meet with Black Desert. We don't have an exact timeline of when things are going to open. We've had a couple of golf tournaments announced, but we need a timeline as to when things are going to open, what parts of it will open, and then get into what revenue we can expect to see from that. Right now, we are starting to see some sales tax off of golf on their golf course, but it'll be the end of the year before we really get another report to say this is the impact we're going to see from even just that. So we'll be sitting down with Black Desert and going over the projections for revenue. But I think the first thing will be generating the new impact fee studies.
And on that, just as we get into some of these other funding questions and House bills and things like that, I think from city side, it's important for both of us. You're on it now with the major resort there. We'll have it here, I think, in a few years. Just understanding what those revenues do generate as to how we assess taxes and whether, I mean, now they're looking at a 1%. I just trying to understand. I think in that it'd be good for all of us to understand, some type of projection, to understand what kind of revenues are coming out, because I think it will have an impact for staffing, and impact fees aren't going to go to staffing. Certainly they'll go to equipment and things like that, but I don't think they could be used for staffing on that. So that's, I think that's really where our biggest expense is today, is we've added 40% in just staffing, just in that. So just trying to understand where that is before we go, knowing what all those are, so we know exactly what we need, what our needs are on that. And I would agree that, we get the wish list out there and understand what are the necessities and address that.
So when Black Desert came before our council requesting a public infrastructure district, they had, Kate, I need you to back me up on this or correct me, one or the other. They had some sort of preliminary projections as to what the revenue to the city was going to be. But the timetable, I think, has been impacted by the tournament. I think they've accelerated things. So I'm sure that whatever we might have now is likely not completely accurate, but there are some numbers out there, at least on our side, and a rough timetable that was given to us a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I might say their expenses have increased. So you mentioned the public infrastructure district, PID. I wouldn't be surprised if they come in just to get your nod, because I think we already approved what the maximum could be for a levy. And they talked about a certain amount at first, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if that number goes up because of the cost increases for infrastructure. So I think some of their costs of construction are still increasing, have increased dramatically. And so that will impact a lot of these things that you're asking about as far as what revenues they're generating. It morphs every month. And so it's hard to pin down sometimes, but as they announce these events, they're having to pin down certain things. And so I think we'll be able to start getting better numbers from them, but we'll continue to ask for that.
All right. So that's kind of the staffing. Again, that's kind of where we're looking to go. So if we can get that 10 on a day, right now we're 6, that'd be, it'll happen eventually. The timeline will be more the questions. So what the impact of these facilities and stuff will have on our calls. So, and then we'll move into vehicles. So NFPA 1901, we're looking at both mileage and then year of vehicle, and that's kind of how we replace things and or do staffing. We look at these recommendations and obviously the statutes that we have. So we make decisions based on those publications, and then and obviously the demand for call volume and those things. So just kind of, I'm not going to do an overview of every single piece of equipment, but some of the big ones we're looking at replacing engine 332. So that's that brush type 3 that's out currently deployed. That's a 2005. It's got 140,000 miles on it. So that, again, that's coming. We've already purchased that vehicle in whole. It's coming from Boise Mobile Equipment, which is pretty much the national supplier for wildland trucks. So I know some of the city administration folks are going to follow up on that, make sure we get that vehicle soon. So that rig will go into reserve status. Right around 15 years or 150,000 miles is when something should go into reserve status. That's kind of the metric. And that one will be ready to go into that reserve status. So it'll be a backup. When something breaks down, we'll jump on that. Medic 32 is the big one. I would like to, the vendors, the suppliers are wanting a commitment from you all, basically. The city manager, whoever we need to make a commitment when we purchase a vehicle, because it's, again, 24 to 36 months out, depends on what it is. But Medic 32 has 156,000 miles. That's the white ambulance up at Ivans. We want to replace that, start the ball rolling on that. It's a 2015. That's the first out for Ivans Station. So then the one that we have that we lease from the county, we obviously don't own. That's that new one at the Rachel Station. So the next one that we own, again, is that white ambulance up at Ivans. We want to try to get that replaced. It was 270,000 was what the county paid for that ambulance that's in the Rachel Station. And I think current projections with equipment were around 400,000, correct, Lance? So that's just in a year and a half, the costs have gone up. So it's going to cost us around 350,000. Lance put together, I think, a great option for a lot of our vehicles is to move things to leases. I think it'll cut the costs, annually for our capital or our expenses. And I have some numbers on the ambulance that I'm speaking of, the one that we had them put together a kind of a spreadsheet on what it would cost, but it's about 50,000 annually if we do a 10-year lease. And again, that would probably hit the reserve status life. We don't drive. It's a 2015, has about 150,000 miles, but it has that many miles because that was the primary rig folks were driving. So I don't expect it to hit that many miles as quickly, right? Because we have more moving pieces of equipment in town now. So things are getting less miles on them. So, but about a 10-year lease would put it about 50,000 annually. So again, we would get a commitment from you all and we would let them know, hey, we want to purchase this vehicle. And it'd be probably 2 years before we're even seeing that thing delivered. So I would say that's our primary request. As far as equipment goes, I think it's definitely a need. We are fixing, and I was telling Brock we can fix it. We've been doing that. It'll go down and we'll do whatever it needs to be done to fix the things. But once we get into transmissions, obviously, and then the motor, it's going to be, $8,000-$10,000, right? So any questions on the ambulance?
Yes.
Thought?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
So Dale, once again, correct me if I'm remembering this incorrectly. The newer ambulance that Ivan's put into the pool here was a CIB grant to us, correct? And we haven't approached CIB for a long time. I don't know if Santa Clara's had any dealings with them of late.
Yeah, the one at Rachel Station ambulance
Yeah.
from the county.
Yeah.
Yeah, Okay, I thought it was like an American Recovery Act, ARPA thing. and
No,
then- Okay,
it was CIB, and I understand that they're a little tougher to get money out of, but they funded that entire vehicle, and I think that we ought to at least put in application for something like this, because they look very favorably on this type of equipment. Don't know that they love the idea of $1.5 million ladder truck, but I think an ambulance might still be out there, because it's been, gosh, what, Dale, 5 years ago we did that? Is that about right?
One of the good things about the CIB is that they supplied Iron County, because Iron County is having to serve this borough legitimately away from any other area. And we have that same concern. So CIB, not only it was a grant, it wasn't a payback. You got the ambulance, and I think that would still be a possibility of getting that, along with, lowering the loan for a ladder truck. I mean, those things are available.
Yeah.
Gary Zabriskie is still our go-to guy, and I think you can work with him and start the process right now.
Well, yeah, some of the conversations that might need to happen too with Gary is, I've been to 3 of the meetings, and he basically said we won't qualify for a grant because our income per capita is too high. So they will do a lease. And he said it's right around 2% would be like for the ladder. So I don't know if that changes because it's not as expensive, but that would be something.
Usually on those,
Yeah.
I think with the CDBG grants, go to the income, if I'm not mistaken, not just.
I'm not talking CDBG.
Yeah, that CDBG looks at your income, but it's straight.
This is
grants from
community
CIB.
impact.
Yeah, this is a different animal you may not know about. And I just want you to understand that the reason we were successful with that was twofold. First of all, we had been called upon by the state to service an area much broader than our own city. And that condition still exists, even though we're combined now. And so they looked at that, and it was not just the fact that we had this coverage area, it was the fact that the wear and tear on at that time, our current ambulance was extreme because of these trips that had to be taken out to Matagua or wherever. So I believe we continue to have a very good relationship with them. We have not approached them requesting any funding of any kind, I don't believe, for that entire period of time. So I think we'd be welcome on their doorstep, and I really believe we ought to do everything in our.
Gary is correcting you in a way. We have one of the commissioners, the county commissioners, that sits on the Five County Association, who will also be sitting on the CIB board, go directly to him and present your
Okay.
case to him and let him take.
Yeah, and we can talk with you in detail more directly, because you came here since that occurred, but.
Okay.
Let me clarify just for me. The new ambulance we got from the county was ARPA funds, right?
ARPA, yes, they use their ARPA.
So the CIB is a different ambulance from that.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so there's another one besides the Medic 32.
Yeah, the one at the Ivans station is my understanding is that's the one you folks Ivans purchased. That's
The old Medic 32, it's another.
no, it's the current in-service Medic 32 2015 Chevrolet. It's got the 100.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The number, but it's the red.
Yeah, and we can figure it all out. I would look.
But I think the revenue sources, and that is a
Yeah.
definite revenue source that can be
Well,
tapped.
there's an expert right there.
Yeah.
Then you sit down with the chief.
Once they throw you off that board, they never want to hear from you again.
Yeah, when you put it.
Yeah, I think there's some definite conversations, whoever
Well,
the
good
contact
thing
would
is
be.
They're still having ongoing funds, and,
Yeah.
and so there is a possibility, and in this particular case, we're servicing something the state should serve, and the CIB is aware of that, and that's why they've given it in other areas, and it's
Sure.
something that needs to be processed and looked at. But
Okay.
we do, I don't know who the commissioner sitting on that.
LeBron will tell you that the county, we're doing some real favors for the county, right? So they would certainly support our request.
Okay, and then, so the second big item obviously is that the ladder truck to try to get something moving in that direction. That's a huge, it's $2 million purchase, right? So they originally said it's without the waterway, without the pump, it's I think it was like 1.3 to 1.7. And then we did the whole spec and here's what your cost is going to be. It was 1.999, basically 2 million. And that's without any equipment. So that's expensive. And I for sure ISO said, yep, you're going to need a ladder for the next rating. And I know just our tallest ladder right now is 24 foot. It's an extension ladder, right? So any of the apartments that we have, we don't have anything to reach that. And obviously St. George is going to help for sure. Stoker's been great and they'll send their rigs. So, but
let me add on to that, as you heard Chief say, the cost of a ladder truck is roughly $2 million. And Adele's comment about our impact fee analysis, as I looked at it this week, Ivan Cities and ours, we have in there for a ladder truck and apparatus, which impact fees can pay for. But it is about done at $1 million total. So you guys had 500,000 and we had 500,000. So we're $1 million short of trying to assess an impact fee for the ladder truck that's going to be needed. So as you know, that says we're not collecting impact fees needed to be able to help pay for this ladder truck in the long term. And as Chief will tell you about the ambulance, 24 months out to get a ladder truck, we're probably closer to 36 months.
Yep.
One build.
Do they sell used ladder trucks? Ladder truck's gonna get a lot of use. but
Yeah.
You need it to meet your ISO, so.
Yeah. No, they do, they do sell used stuff for sure. Mhm.
It just seems like,
Yeah.
I mean, you need an operating ladder truck, but I can't imagine that gets used 2 or 3 times a year in our cities.
That's what's in the 3 trailers.
Yeah, we could, you know, I don't know if that, I was gonna jump on Auto Trader and type in ladder.
Check it out.
See what-
Let me know if you find anything good.
I just didn't know if that option.
You might hit,
we could
yeah.
go Pick up something for, again,
Yeah.
does it operate? I mean, it would still have to meet everything you guys needed, but it's not.
Yeah, I think.
We kick the can down the road.
Right.
Because we need it for our ratings, but it just doesn't, it's probably just not gonna get used a lot. It needs to work, it needs to function, it needs to do that, but ultimately, if Black Desert has a fire, you're gonna have 3 ladder trucks from the county, all including ours at that time. So it just seems like that's something we ought to pursue, at least look at before we make that commitment.
Yeah.
I don't disagree that, in fact, I was telling Councilwoman Mathis here that they come back for tax incentives again, the ladder truck would be probably the piece in there that needs to be included in that because it
Yeah.
needs to be a benefit to the community.
Yeah.
But I would say at least let's look at it and see before we see what that comes.
Yeah. They.
Oh, you got it. You found it.
There's 138 ladder trucks for sale on firetruckmall.com.
Yeah. Lance knows.
All for custom quote.
Custom quote.
Can you put one?
I love
That's
your
awesome.
idea.
Yeah, there you go. Let's do it.
You get yellow,
What
you
is it?
get
When you
red.
put it in the basket? My wife puts it in the basket.
Yeah. Send that to me, would you?
Will they deliver it?
Let's send it to Lance, actually.
Good find.
Yep.
Good suggestion.
So some of that's like the staffing, obviously, to run that equipment, right? And then the station doesn't fit. So the one they spec us, that 1.99 doesn't fit in any of our stations. The one out my prior employment would fit in the Rachel station. So we just got to find the right, fit for it. And it'd be cheaper because it's a little bit shorter and stuff. So, and the height requirements and, but I think that's some, again, was on the docket, the CIB stuff I was going to that, Scott Bannon had sent me out to initially, was on the docket to try to do the purchase for a ladder, right? So I guess it's been 2 years.
So you've been to community impact.
Yeah, I've been to 3 of them, and I got it from like kind of Gary's mouth was the per capita. You guys won't get a grant. I mean, that's just Gary, but we'll give you a loan. So I think you all maybe have some more.
CPG is an entirely
Yeah.
different thing. That's what 5 counties ministers. CIB is an entirely different. thing.
Okay. I'll make sure we're,
What minerals?
yeah, that's, yeah. But Denny might be the contact for that then?
Danny is.
Okay, so maybe well,
Do we still have, Doug, is he still on? So he would, been on CIB, right? Like moved over to CIB? And I know he was helpful with somebody else pushing, they were saying Jordan there, pushing for our stuff, so.
Transportation Commission.
Water.
Should maybe there's a transportation. See the cell phone. Is there?
so those are the two big on equipment. Everything else is running great. And, we have some new items that you folks purchased over the years. So that's our kind of our focus, get that ambulance hopefully, and then the ladder eventually. So any questions or more thoughts on that? I'll work with Denny. And
What was the ladder truck height that you needed to reach?
it's 100, it would be 105 foot would be basically the area. And that's what they mostly all are. 100 to 110, depending on, but yep. We got to get in the Rachel station. Otherwise, obviously the whole building of a new station thing is an added cost. So, yep. Yes.
While we can save money also, we'll have it right away. We don't have to wait 3 years for a ladder truck. We would have it in a few months if we went with the used model to start.
Yeah, and we could do my use and they do refurbish. There's options to it. We just got to find the right thing that can fit the station, like I said. So, yeah, I got nothing else to add on that. So, all right. Okay, so we'll move into station. This is kind of the last area. The Rachel station, we had the remodel. That everything has been pretty good. We had a leak there. We fixed some things. We put in the remote access key systems. All the systems are great. We're doing a maintenance program on those to make sure the HVAC stuff gets serviced annually. We have the floor serviced and on and on. So that station is holding strong. We're working in the back, our training centers back there. So we have those Connex bins. We want to add onto those. For our training for our ISO, we need to have 3 stories. Is basically it's a facility training. We can travel to get that training. You need about 15 hours per person a year. The multi-story does help for operations, so folks can throw ladders and do those things. But those containers are about $2,500 to use, like a sea shipping container. We have one of our captains that's a great welder and has done a lot of stuff to our current facilities. But those props and those things are in the multi-year. And I can send this to you. You may or may not have the multi-year. I think Mr. Scott has it or had it, but it kind of just lists our planning for up through 28. It does include some of the training. We call them props that we use to train with. So, but nothing great on the Rachel station. I think the Ivans Center Street station is the discussion that I'd like to have, or it could be another setting for it, but. And I think primarily we focus on the crew quarters. So I'd like to go and try to get bids. There's options for partitions. I'd have to check with Con on the fire code and all those things, but get occupants, rooms for people that, like for right now, we have folks that'll do ride-alongs or EMS students. And so folks will come and they'll lay out in their recliners. They don't have the privacy. So we want to get some type of dorm rooms in that big hallway, at least 2 additional rooms. And again, we might be able to do that with partitions. I don't know. So we have to look into get bids and talk to contractors and look at the code and see what we can do with that. And then the bathrooms upstairs, obviously we have male, females working, and they kind of have a common area. We'd like to separate those so that they don't have that obvious interaction. The showers are separate, of course, but the main area, there should be 2, like Rachel station, 1 female, 1 male. we'd like to look at that. It's obviously going to be a big expense to remodel that upstairs crew quarters. And I think you all are familiar with that area. Hopefully you are. And I think otherwise, those office spaces, we don't really use them too much. We don't have any demands for that, but I think to kind of be in compliance and to be able to house crew, especially as we expand, is to get those dorms built somehow, and then obviously secure the bathrooms. So that's really the main things. Both stations need generators. We should have those automatic generators. We deferred that this year's budget. We're going to do it next year. They're about 20 grand each station. So that'll, because of all of our dispatching stuff, our radios, it all runs on electricity, obviously. So those are the main, I think, areas of focus.
So concerning that Center Street facility, the longer term plan, 5-year plan or whatever that we looked at a year ago with you, is calling for a Rachel station to be built, not Rachel, pardon me, a Quavasa station to be built out more towards Cayenta. And I've done a lot of research on what is going to be the more practical thing for us to do. So I'd like to introduce this into your thinking. From that Center Street station to the furthest corners of our city, it's almost completely centrally located. It's 5.5 minutes to Tuacahn, and this is driving 35 miles an hour that Bob told me a apparatus would be driving. And so the furthest point in Cayenta, same story, driving on the roads at that speed, and even a shorter period of time to get down to the southwest corner or over to Black Desert in the southeast corner. So that location and that building have potential to be expanded. And we're looking at, last I heard it was $3.5 million for a new station. That's probably more than that now. And I want you to start thinking in terms of us. For one thing, there's capacity there. You mentioned the offices on in the west half of that building that were originally apparatus bays and could be easily converted to that again. The garage doors had windows put in them, right? And there are sloped floor offices in those spaces. So there's that, and if a longer apparatus, a drive-through apparatus had to be added to that, there's even a way that we could look at accomplishing that. So I'd like to defer the focus on some new building, some new fire station out on Quavasa or whatever, in favor of something that would be considerably more economical for the city to build, in adding to, remodeling, and utilizing the areas of that current station that aren't currently being used specifically for fire and EMS.
Yeah, so remodeling of the Ivins, the Center Street station is what you're saying, correct?
Yeah,
utilizing the existing.
We've had brief discussions about this with the council, but I think I'm representing the opinion here, and they can chime in. But we see the need for a second station in Ivins at some point in time.
Yeah.
But in terms of budget constraints over the next half dozen years, right? That is going to be by far our most economical way to expand our capacity. And I just don't want planning to move forward without that idea being kind of at the center of your thinking as far as Ivins goes. Any contrary opinions from my Ivins council?
So
Dale?
Going to our side, what started the conversation years ago was knowing Black Desert was coming, knowing that South Hills was coming. Now South Hills is still coming maybe 10, 20 years down the road, but Black Desert's there. So at that time, I did what you did. Went from the stations we had and realized we have two really well-located fire stations in both cities right now. And, if South Hills and maybe that solved, maybe that, that was a discussion, something on Santa Clara Drive down the road, that at that point you would have three that are basically lined up center of both cities that could service these areas, and now Ivans is growing further west. And from a financial side, I would agree that it's a visibly, I mean, it's for your citizens and for people driving, it's located right there where you see it. You're talking storage for a ladder truck and a place to put it. That's the station that's going to respond to Black Desert. Where most of those needs, where you referenced Tuacahn and all that, that's where it's coming from. So in the planning, I would agree that whatever that expansion or remodel looks like, that's all taken into consideration. That would be the location of your ladder truck, because that's where most of your needs are coming.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the Sunrise Engineering, I'm not sure if you folks did one, but I know Santa Clara has one that lists the stations and kind of those locations and shows 3 stations and long-term. But again, I absolutely want to think about the station development and projects. But for me, it's like, I want to get the staffing, absolutely the staffing up to where we want it. And then obviously the equipment, and we can do refurbished equipment as long as we get it to serve what we need to. And then the stations would come, but that could be, somehow there's funds to build a station and we can do that too. But that would be my focus is the staffing and the
Fire and
equipment.
EMS is in your camp, and we're totally respectful of that, but I'd be happy to meet with you, when you have particularly engineers or architects or whatever that are looking around to develop ideas. I think I can be helpful to you. I've actually redesigned that building, so I've got it on CAD and I can do anything you want for it. But there are some really obvious things that can be done, and a couple of things that aren't quite as obvious. I'd be happy to share with whomever. But I think honestly, over the next 5 to 10 years, that for a third of what we're looking at to build a new station, we could literally double or more the capacity of that station, both in terms of dormitory, staff areas, as well as apparatus bays.
Okay, so just so I'm hearing you correct, you want to kind of focus towards remodeling and looking at that for the Center Street.
Council, any objection to what I said?
Good, okay. And that's, I have some, we'll talk later on who, I guess, go to Brock, but we have figures for some things. We were able to look at, have some contractors come in and give us some numbers already, so. Good deal. All right. I think that's really it on our stations. Again, I can give you this multi-year planning. The big ones are the generators. Again, we'll probably do that hopefully in the next budget coming up. And that's really all I have. Thank you guys and your continued support. I know it's been a financial challenge, so I appreciate your guys' support. And hopefully the service we're providing is what y'all want, and the public and citizens, you guys are getting good feedback. And if you're not, I want to hear, so we can make those changes and do what the citizens want. So thank you.
Chief, any questions for Chief? Mike, have you got any?
Nope, no questions. Thank you so much, Chief Parker.
You're welcome. Yep.
No other questions? Thank you, Chief Parker.
All right.
Second item on the agenda is HB 392. Mayor Hart and I tag team today. He went to the HB 392 meeting. I went to the Water District meeting. Give us an update, Mayor Hart.
So are you all familiar with what HB 392 is and what it does? Pretty well. So very briefly, for the benefit of those that are here, this is a rural EMS related bill that Washington County sort of ended up being tag teamed onto. And so the reason I asked about all our staff, all our full-time personnel cross-trained, is that this funding is focused on EMS service. So congratulations, you're running an EMS service that happens to also drive fire trucks, okay? So the intent of the bill, the bill sponsor, wanted this to be drafted so that separate districts or cities within the county could opt to put on the ballot up to a 1 cent increase in sales tax specifically for EMS/fire.
1% or 1 cent?
1 cent, what did I say?
1%.
Sorry, 1 cent, thank you. Up to 1 cent. So going through the sausage mill of bill writing, what came out of the legislature was not that. And so the way the language reads and the tax people have verified this, so we know that even, no matter what the idea was or what the desire was, that we're stuck with what they did. And that is that any ballot initiative, if you will, has to come through the county, and everybody's lumped together. So the Hurricane Valley Fire District, any other district that would apply, the unincorporated area of the county, and Santa Clara and Ivins would all be lumped together, and whatever the outcome of the vote would apply to every jurisdiction, right? By the way, Lance was there, so Lance, chime in if I miss a detail or whatever, right? And you ought to come up here.
Caught most of it. That's where the issues we had. I think the big one, I'll let you continue, is just the decision made by the commissioners today.
Well, we actually recommended at the meeting that was held a couple of years ago that because the bill had not ended up being what the sponsor wanted, that the prudent thing for us would be for it to go back to the legislature, let them fix the bill, because I don't think Hurricane Valley wants that determination to be made by us or vice versa, right? I mean, if it's turned down there and passed here, it still doesn't work. It's right now, it's just the combined, it's like any other thing on the ballot, more nays than ayes, and it fails. So we had a meeting today during which we heard the county commissioners state that they have been speaking with the legislators, including leadership. The fact that the bill passed is huge because they're much more inclined to fix a bill that's already been passed than to look at something new. So what we're anticipating is that within the next month, the county is going to draft some revisions to this bill and run that past various legislators, particularly the sponsor, but also leadership and so forth, to see if there are any obstacles with that. And that would then go before the next legislature. They're trying to do some kind of an expedited process, right, Lance?
Right, they're already starting on it. We've already got some meetings set up to start working with them right away. We're already in the interim session, so it's going to move quick. I know they've met with leadership. I've met with some of them. I have a meeting scheduled next week with St. George to also kind of collaborate on that and see what we can do, trying to iron out all of these issues. The biggest one is the voting, how it works, so that we're not impacting others, they're not impacting us. The unincorporated areas was another one that was of concern for some. But overall, everybody feels the same. If we make these changes, each city, even for you guys, it would be independent. There is a chance Ivins could vote one way and Santa Clara could vote another. And that's perfectly fine. That's what it should be, but that's not what it is now. So we'll get there. Like you said, a month is for the goal right now.
And Commissioner Iverson had a new idea that he threw out that Dale and I both thought was a good one. Did you, Lance?
I agree too. Yeah, you're talking about the 1/4%.
Yeah, so we have this 1/4% option, right, for transportation. He was suggesting that we get the legislature to also grant a 1/4% option for EMS as well, which could be done just through the legislative bodies. And that would, that doesn't cover our need, but that would be a start, and it would be quick. Then we'd have some period of time within which it would have to go on the ballot or not be passed. Now, this is just what they're going to try to get done. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, but it does look, I mean, I had the sense it was very positive that the sponsor has already spoken with the bill writer. They realized they screwed up, right? I mean, they didn't do what the discussion was in the legislature to do. And they especially didn't do what the sponsor intended with this bill. So I think this is just going to be a kind of a housekeeping thing. Don't know about the quarter percent. I mean, that would be nice because we could do that without having to go through, you know, the ballot process. But at any rate, that's kind of brings you up to speed. Will not be on, right?
It'll be pushed to postpone.
Thanks, Lance. Thanks, Mayor Hart. Any questions on this? Miscellaneous items. Items, you're a guest. Any miscellaneous items? Always standing up to say it.
He's going to pick up the ladder truck. He's already got it in Milwaukee.
Appreciate it.
No, just thank you very much for hosting it. This has been a really productive meeting. I'm glad that we're doing it. Feels like we talked about some really important things for both cities. And as we see these budgets continue, and I don't see any way that they're not going to continue to escalate. And so, you know, if the legislature will help us with this option, we can potentially get it on sales tax and let all these thousands of visitors that are coming or will be coming help us pay these additional costs. Or I don't know about you, but I think our city would have to start with the truth of taxation. We're the same.
We, like, again, you say this on a low level and everyone responds, well, it's got to go all the way up. But obviously there's already a tourism tax out there that's funded with tens of millions of dollars every year. We're branding stadiums and everything else with those tax dollars, but that's what's bringing a lot of that in. And then we've got fire and EMS and police that is bearing the brunt of it. They lowered that, what could be distributed this year, by 5%. Still, the lion's share of that is going to areas where in advertisement. But I really think that from a statewide, from starting at the city level and the county levels, you could get about 10% of that and fund probably every county's needs in some where you're at without raising any tax. And a lot of those funds, if you look where they're getting spent, it's almost laughable where some of those funds are going. And so my thing is the cities, and it's got to start at our level, and here we are, just two small municipalities, just working that way up to say, look, let's push back a little bit on those funds that are already being collected by and already being paid by our taxpayers, by all of us. And then getting distributed to areas where, I don't know, it wouldn't take much to fund what we need. And there's a bunch there.
Well, some of the things you look at on TRT, transient room tax, right now, the county currently gets, I believe, 4.25%, where the municipalities only get 1%. You guys have seen this with the Black Desert, but the municipalities bear the burden of providing those resources. That's something that needs to change, that percentage. And that's where they have to end up with all this money. As you see reports coming through Casey's, and you can see what counties are receiving, and it's like, this is crazy. What burden do they have to provide the resources, fire, EMS, police, streets, water, power, sewer, so all these things? They don't have that. We have to provide that. And that percentage needs to change. That's when we've talked to Lance and I, and also with the council about with our legislators this year. We need to talk. Something needs to change. I know counties will fight that because they want that money, but that's money that's being generated in us. And then we got to go beg the county, hey, can we get a grant? Can we get something from you to get the money back that we were generating with the things that are happening in our municipality? So that's a big one. I think also helps in funding that we talked about that can come back, that helps in a lot of different avenues within our general funds.
But again, that starts with the state legislature.
Yeah.
They're the ones that have passed the law. they're the ones that need to change it. To me, it's such a, the League of Cities and Towns ought to be full bore in trying to get that reversed so that we're not taking 50% of the dollars to do advertising when St. George, Washington County, Santa Clara Islands has been found. We don't need to be found anymore.
So that is a huge point to me. Follow-up question to what you just said is conditions change. You can see why all of those millions of dollars of marketing occurred over the last 25 years, right? And we're kind of the beneficiaries of some of that, the Mighty Five campaign and everything else. With national and state parks packed to the gills, the question is, do we really need to be begging people to come here anymore? And to your point, spending those marketing dollars or advertising dollars for that. I mean, the problem now to our city, your city, I think St. George and Washington, all is how the heck are we going to take care of all those people who are coming anyway? And now we got the PGA coming. The president of the PGA was there. I had my Ivan shirt on. He came up to me and he said, when our camera crews set up and start showing pictures of shooting across that lava and those greens up to your beautiful red mountains, he said, people from all over the world are going to want to come here to see these. Cringing in the audience. And he said, our outreach is 500 million people. Not that we have all those people want to come, but what he was basically saying is that our cities will be, the names of our cities will be known by people all across the world. So how much advertising did they just take care of, right? With the Goodyear blimp flying over our cities.
Well, but as a state as a whole, there are counties that may need that. Duchesne, counties out of the mainstream that may want some of that advertising. Why can't the legislature allow the counties to dictate where they spend the money, but giving cities a percentage of that regardless of where the county wants to spend it? Would you get right?
Well, and I think
We've been talking about it for.
Yeah, and I think my point is, and that's the answer the short answer that comes out is it's gotta be through the legislative body, but it's gotta start at the city level. That push has gotta come from, and you're right, when that campaign went out, I don't think anybody disagreed. Yeah, you got these parks, but it's changed, that everything's changed, and now it's, so it just now, and they did, I think they backed it off 5% this year. If I remember right, the exact numbers, but it was that. But yeah, it might have been, maybe it was 2%. It wasn't a lot, but it was a move in the right direction. And really those funds could be used for some of these, you look at fire and EMS and your streets and roads and the things that are actually impacted in this. And those are the things before the solution just, truth in taxation, raising that, looking at the broader spectrum and going, okay, where are those funds? How are they being used? Just to assure that when we go down that road at the time, whatever we have to do, we've exhausted every effort, every avenue to say, so we can look every citizen in the eye and say, we've looked at everything. And here, we're looking at grants, the chief come up and talk about the grants and those are all just great steps, the fire station on Center Street. Say we've exhausted every effort to utilize every dollar in the best way we can. And it's probably going to be a hard push, but I think it's got to come from our level up.
Well,
to start the
we've got
process.
the League of Cities and Towns, we've already got an organization.
Yeah, we do.
And we've already got.
And we got a meeting.
Lobbyists with that organization. And all we have on a county level, a lobbyist now that they've hired. We work through that organization, we ought to be able to produce enough pressure to at least have a look at what we're doing. But it's got to start with the leadership.
And your point is that conditions vary from county to county. And so
give it
one size fits all, which is typical of state legislation, isn't working the way it ought to for us, right?
Originally, it may have been a great dollar spend to advertise Washington County or whatever. Now it's not.
And back to Brock's comment, that tax differential, that road tax for Ivan City today, it'll be Santa Clara when they build, is significantly, it's gonna be in the millions of dollars, where that gap is basically a 4-to-1 revenue share, where, you know, you're bearing, and we're bearing that with you, with everything, and the brunt of all that. So it's a significant, like I said, it'll take time, but even just baby steps on that help swing that a little bit, help cover some of these additional costs that we're seeing as cities.
Okay, well, we've got work to do. But I think we got the right people to make that. Thank you. Anything else? Any other items? Close it. Yep, 2 hours. Thank you, everyone. I don't need a motion. We're adjourned.
Thanks.
We'll see you in 6 months.
Yeah.
Get around sooner.
I'll bring you some towels. You said the ugliest fish in the world.
I was gonna show you.
I'll take out the-